Hi, I'm Jane Morrell, founder and CEO of Carer Solutions.
And hi, I'm David Boyles, Head of Brands, Government Affairs and Advocacy at Carer Solutions, and I'm really looking forward to this chat today. Welcome to Built Different. Hi, Jane.
Hi, David.
Well, I think it would be beneficial to start off with a little bit of context.
Yep.
So can you tell us what did you build and when was that moment when you realised that nothing like this existed in Australia?
Yeah. So I created an organisation called Carer Solutions, which is Australia's only service where people can directly employ their own chosen support workers in the disability sector. And what we do is we set people up to be the legal employer of their own chosen support workers and take care of all their payroll and compliance needs. And I started in the disability sector a little while before I started the service. Yeah. So I was working for an organisation and a lot of my work existed in regional and remote areas where I was travelling around and meeting a lot of families. And I think the number one thing for me in meeting those families is everybody had a grievance at the time with their care arrangements. And that was centred largely around the use of traditional care agencies, which at the time was pretty much the only option for people. Back then, this is all predating the NDIS. People were block funded traditionally, which meant that they could only use services and supports that their funding was attached to. Then also at the time, there was what we call, which still exists today, the Every Australian Counts campaign, where there are a lot of families out there lobbying for change. And this was the start and the origins of what became the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which we now know as the NDIS, which was going to change the way families received funding and supports, which meant that effectively funding would sit in their own hands and they'd be able to use services that they chose, which was a massive revolution and actually the biggest medical reform since Medicare in the 70s that Australia's ever seen. So a massive fundamental change. So after hearing so many grievances from families, I started to look around into what type of service exists out there where people can actually directly employ but not have to be burdened with those obligations because they've got enough to think about in their world with, either having disability themselves or caring for a loved one. And I think what really fascinated me and still fascinates me and us to this day is that there wasn't an organisation that existed to support them at all. And that was, my moment that really sort of lit a fire in me where I realised this is crazy. I need to do something about this and solve this problem.
Yeah, so no blueprint, probably no access to mentors who had expertise in this space. That's quite a brave undertaking to have this idea in a sector which has been a certain way for quite some time and kind of drive forward a bit. Yeah. Was that probably quite a daunting and lonely experience?
Oh, incredibly. It was, daunting, lonely, isolating. And I guess the irony of that is it's still that way for us this day, given, we are that unicorn in the space. We're the only ones still doing this, nearly 15 years later. So absolutely lonely and isolating and really challenging, especially when you're so young and you're building something, as you said, in a framework that's being built at the same time.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And I know we touch on this a bit later, but fast forward to 2026.
Yeah.
Because of the unique nature of what Carer Solutions offers, we still don't always fit in that framework. So a little bit of irony there.
Absolutely. There is. And we also go into this a little bit later on. But, I think the interesting part about that is, we're just fascinated by how that can happen in this day and age where you can be operating in an industry or a sector and breaking that new ground and pioneering and then, lo and behold, over a decade down the line, you're still the only one doing it. So it's, it comes with a whole set of challenges.
And what you just said, the only one doing it, I want to touch on that a little bit more and actually go back to the 2011 era. So late 20s?
Late 20s, early 30s,
A bit of a personal question. What did it cost you to, I suppose, go first or be the only one from both a personal and, if appropriate, a financial point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on a personal front, a lot. I started this business and, I was in, I think it was nearly a 7-year relationship at that point in time. That was a real moment for me where, I realized that relationship was not going to continue. It was very apparent we were going in really different directions. So that became, I guess, a lot more isolating because all of a sudden I didn't have a partner and I was starting this business and I was, effectively lonely on all sides. And also I think it's that time where, you're really in your formative years, late 20s, early 30s, all your friends are getting married, they're having kids, they're doing all the things. And you're deciding to, a typical day or week for me, I should say, would be to work. A lot of my work at the time was out there on the road, meeting families, meeting organisations, pounding the pavement, getting the word out there.
Yeah.
And then I'd have all these emails and everything that I needed to catch up on and the actual work that I needed to do on the weekend. So I'd, get into my apartment at Friday night, order Uber Eats and just sit there and work nonstop until Sunday. And I was just so excited to be able to lock myself away and get so much work done so then I could launch myself into the next week and just be out there on the road meeting families and being in community again. And that was my life for years, whilst, my friends were doing all the things that I wasn't. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said you enjoyed working weekends. There's
Loved
not
it.
too many that do.
No.
And,
I think because I could see the benefit and the impact that I was making, which is really critical. I could see the families that were literally having their lives changed by what I was creating. And that still is, for me and the team, the number one, motivator and driver.
Absolutely.
Which is cool.
And can we touch on financially?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't have any money to start this business. I went at the time, I had a business plan, was going around to banks, talking about this business model, meeting with different, business banking managers and all these sorts of people. That was all new to me, walking in very naive, not knowing, just with this idea and this, ambition to make it work. And I got a lot of rejections from a lot of banks. And then I met a bank manager or business banking manager, I think the term is, who actually really believed in me and the model and also couldn't believe that it didn't exist in the space and was aware that the NDIS was on the horizon and saw the opportunity that I did to be able to impact these families in such a positive way. And he actually said, we look like we can probably, approve you. Then this moment really sticks in my mind. I'll never forget it, where he said, you need to open an account with us, which I didn't have at the time. You need to put $175, such a random figure, into a bank account and open that account today. So I very quickly excused myself from the meeting, said I had to go to the bathroom, was quickly on my internet banking just to check to make sure that I had $175 in the bank so I could do that. And luckily I did. And I guess, kind of the rest is history from that point. But that was where I got the funds.
What is it, rice crackers or after that?
Pretty much. I mean, I think it helped that I was working, 7 days a week because I wasn't socialising, I wasn't going out, I wasn't spending much money, which I definitely think was a good thing for me.
What was really interesting then, you spoke about going from bank, was it bank manager to bank manager, rejection after rejection. How did the sector respond to you? You mentioned earlier that the sector had been a certain way for a while. There are these big players that had been traditionally block funded that essentially had, I don't know if control's the right word, but control of the market. And
absolutely.
How did they feel when suddenly you popped along with this new idea? Something an idea that no one had heard of before. Was it welcomed? Were they a little bit cold?
Huge. Absolutely not welcomed, very cold. I think I was sort of looked at funny. I'd be speaking about the service and people would just give me this look of disbelief. What are you talking about? What do you mean? It doesn't make sense. Does she understand what this sector's like? It's very traditional. This is not an approach that the sector's essentially ready for. And, I had this in mind because I had in mind the change and the revolution that was coming in terms of the implementation of the NDIS. CIS. So I knew, and from all the research that I'd done and the families I'd spoken to, I knew it would absolutely work. And this is what families wanted. But that old sort of archaic sentiment I was met with at every turn. There was opposition from everyone.
Yeah, and assumptions.
Absolute assumptions. I think one of the biggest assumptions, and I think one of the most offensive that still exists to this day, was people with disability do not have the capacity or the capabilities to be able to directly employ their own support workers, which I found just disgusting, frankly. And as you know well, we still hear that nearly 15 years down the line.
I know.
Yeah.
And, at a federal government level as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in those early days when you're getting this, cold shoulder from the sector, who was in your corner? Did you have a business partner, colleagues, or was it just you?
Yeah, I actually did have someone that I started the business with. And, that person was a lot older than me at the time, sort of, nearly probably 25 years older than me, maybe a little bit more. So an older male that I started the business with. Our skill sets really complemented each other. He was sort of doing all the background, the setup, the financial side of the business. I was more out on the road, sort of marketing the business and trying to acquire, our first lot of clients. We call them partners. That's our term. So, I did have someone at that point in time that I was working with. Yeah.
And you were working with him?
Yes.
Obviously still aren't?
No, not anymore.
Yeah.
I bought him out of the business probably about 2 years in.
Okay.
It was very apparent that we were growing in different directions and had very different motivations about where we wanted the business to be and what the vision was for the organisation.
Yeah.
I think he was moving into his sort of retirement and twilight years in that sense. And I was, young, enthusiastic, wanting to make an impact in the sector and create a service that people really wanted, needed, and would be life-changing for them. So very much night and day in terms of our aspirations for our impact in the space.
Yeah. And what was it, you mentioned he had a probably financial incentive.
Yeah.
And you were out in the community, essentially.
Yeah.
So there was that disconnect there.
Yep.
He wanted to go quickly, whereas you wanted to be out there, essentially listening and co-designing a solution for the cohort.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, during that time, one of the things that sticks in my mind, which I look back on quite a bit, is, I got a comment from him one day that said, you're out there, you're on the road, you're swanning around, you're having coffees, you're just, meeting people, we need to get clients, we need to get partners, like what's going on? And I thought to myself, I think that was a moment that I was like, whoa, what's happening? And that really, I really felt the hit from that. I really took a big blow to my confidence. I think also at the time, I already questioned my self-worth, being, a really young person that had never started a business before and never done anything in this vein before. And, all I had was my raw passion, my grit, my determination, my resilience, and I guess my energy. And then this older, smarter and wiser person that I was working with was just telling me that I wasn't valued, basically. So that was really hard. Was really hard.
Yeah. And on top of that, not just that person, but you had the resistance from the sector. You're dreaming, you're out of your mind commentary.
Definitely.
And, I love, you obviously have intuition, because you would not have taken a risk to start this off, to start this business if you didn't. But did you spend a certain amount of time seeking approval as a result of this reaction? And I suppose if so, how long did it take you to actually realize you don't need that approval?
Yeah, wow, absolutely. I think very early in the piece, I thought I was, I was questioning my self-worth all the time and, having all these, sort of, I guess, personal crises while I'm trying to get, partners on board and move the business forward at the time. And it took me probably longer than I'd like to admit to really stop questioning my self-worth. Also, once he had left the business and was no longer part of it, I actually had to get a team of experts in to assist me with obviously the payroll side of the business, set up the compliance side, the insurance side, pioneering, breaking so much ground. So there was so much work we had to do on the model to ensure that it was legal, compliant and really safe. So that also was a really interesting time for me as well, because I'd just come out of the back of having that experience where I was questioning myself and then needing to work with people where I needed to have this exponential growth and learning about all these different areas of the business at the same time whilst putting it together. So yeah, it was a huge time.
And I suppose some validation as well will come from the proof being in the pudding. 15 years later, we're still here.
Yeah.
And Direct Employ has positively impacted thousands of Australians.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, there was a point there where, my self-worth caught up. There was a moment with, my capability, and I realised, I could stop questioning who I was and really just start to believe in myself and follow my gut and my intuition, and my ability to be agile, which really propelled me and the business forward. And it's a big trait of our team now, is that ability to be agile, especially in a space where there is a lot of uncertainty and there is an incredible amount of change, enormous change fatigue for everyone. So I think, that definitely has held us in incredible stead.
That's what you just mentioned there. It's interesting because the resistance you faced wasn't just back in 2011. It's very present today, fast forward 15 years.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, there is a lot of resistance. We've mentioned the fact that we don't fit. There's not a box that we tick that describes, that puts us in a service category or categorises us as a service, I should say. And there is a lot of resistance, especially from government, which is often really challenging for us to have to navigate. There are also, it's important to say, some incredible people that we've met in government that have really assisted us in times that we've needed it. I guess that comes to mind for me now is Minister at the time, Nari Arkit. She was working for the NT government, and she was instrumental in a piece that we worked on with a First Nations partner in East Arnhem Land, which was a wonderful outcome for that family and that individual. We also had at the time Bill Shorten's office, his senior advisor Daniel White,
Wonderful.
And more recently, Jenny McAllister's office, the current Minister for the NDIS, her senior advisor. We had a meeting with those guys at their office in Canberra, and that was really great in terms of just wanting to know more about our model, hear our position on registration, understand that we fully support registration, particularly the risk proportionate approach.
Yeah.
So there's some wonderful people, but there's also a lot of, I guess, red tape. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's also a painfully slow pace around implementation of change and reform.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did acknowledge the positive in government, because I think there's a bit of a pitchfork mentality at the moment, and we do have to be conscious that people are inheriting schemes, portfolios.
Definitely.
A lot of these people have safety of Australians as their number one priority, which is where this kind of risk-adverse mentality comes from. And I've seen in meetings that we've been in, some have these light bulb moments, like Nari Arkit you mentioned. There's a solution for one of my constituents, incredible. And others go straight into that, the hesitance.
Totally.
And you kind of touched on that a little bit then, but I think that hesitance is risky when our sector's at tipping point. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about some of the calls and some of the frustrations coming from families, particularly in the last year or two?
Definitely. I think, particularly last year in 2025, things really amped up and got to that critical point. We've had a record number of families, which we never have had before in, nearly 15 years now, reach out to us to obtain support, letters of support, because they've had to either, go through an ART process. They've had to prove why they need their supports again and again in a review process. So they just need that information. And that's obviously causing an enormous amount of distress for the families, and also for us as an organisation. It's just really difficult to be able to navigate through that. And, you're seeing different just different reactions to the changes that are being made. And it's very difficult as a business and also as an individual that's using the NDIS to be able to pivot and change on a dime when something gets, implemented very quickly. And then all of a sudden it's life-changing for you.
Absolutely.
Like, how do you manage that as a family? And then also, how do you manage that as the provider that's trying to, change up maybe the way that your billing works or something, a real process that exists in your business. So incredibly hard times for everyone.
Absolutely. I suppose, you kind of touched on here, there's that resistance to innovation.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
The communities at tipping point. We do see a lot in government consultation papers, the word co-design.
Yep.
And, we've been involved in submissions. They're reaching out to the disability community. But there's kind of still seems to be that little bit of a gap between policy and real lives. Yeah. That's something. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Huge. Yeah. There's a massive gap between, policy and the conversations and the meetings that we have, and then what's actually the reality that people are living from day to day. And I think, I just touch on your comment around innovation for a second. I think it's really interesting because when people think about innovation, they think about technology. That's sort of the first thing that comes to mind. But I think it's important for people to realise that innovation is also a way of doing things and a different approach. And for us, the innovation has been our direct employ model. And innovators in our space, in that sense, aren't and haven't been. We certainly haven't been rewarded in that sense, or recognised, is probably what we should say. If anything, they're looking at, those that don't rock the boat. Yep. They don't want people that are doing things differently. You need to conform. So when you're colouring outside of the lines, you're not recognised, and you've really got to continue to have those meetings and those conversations in order to be involved in some of that co-design, which is exactly what we're doing at the moment with our approach and our submissions that we've done more recently. And that's really hard. But, for us, it's a pivotal moment and a point now, after working with all the families that we do, thousands of families for nearly 15 years, we need to be able to speak about this. Absolutely. And, create noise around, so to speak, and, be that squeaky wheel and make sure that people understand the challenges that families are experiencing out there as a result of the way the sector operates. And it needs to recognise innovation, and it also needs to bring some of that innovation around the table in that co-design to inform the decision-making for the families.
Absolutely. And I think with registration, potentially compulsory registration on the horizon for all providers, it's now more important than ever.
Absolutely.
That people who are innovating and providing solutions are heard and have that seat at the table.
Definitely. Yeah, it's never been more important than now to be able to have those conversations and be able to, really elevate our voices as best we possibly can to obtain those changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. You touched on earlier that you're tired. I'm not sure if that was in this interview or I've just heard you say that before.
You probably heard me say it.
But I suppose that's really understandable. And there is that over a decade of resistance is exhausting and it's frustrating.
Yep.
Is that frustration going to set the tone for this podcast series?
Yeah. Partly, definitely. But I think just touching on your point there around being tired, I think, I'm tired, definitely, as a founder in this space, doing something different as a unicorn for nearly 15 years. Our team are tired of navigating constant change and change fatigue. But critically, the families are exhausted and the sector is at breaking point. So there are so many things that are contributing to, why it's important for us to speak out at this time. But that's part of it. And the other side of it is, we're just really fascinated about, we've been the Lone Ranger in this space, in this sector for so long. there are enormous amount of founders out there that are doing brilliant things and wonderful things that are, really contributing to society in other industries like, logistics and waste management and, areas that like ours that are traditionally, they're not cool, they're not sexy, they're not spoken about. They're certainly not celebrated or recognized. So for us, and for myself, it's really important for us to look at those founders and industries as well and shine a light on the incredible work that a lot of those people are doing.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned then it's time to speak up, essentially.
Yeah.
And, I think it's fair to say you've always spoken up for the community. That's why you created Direct Employ when they needed a solution and they were, at breaking point all those years ago.
Yeah.
However, when you approached me and said, I want to speak up, I was like, no.
I know where this is going.
We are at a time where there's a lot of reform and change going on. Something does need to be done to make the NDIS more sustainable. Yeah. There's a lot of noise and a lot of negative noise out there around the NDIS at the moment. Yeah, totally. Is now an appropriate time to be ruffling feathers, essentially. I know we've had this conversation, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my gut reaction to that question is I'm more afraid of what will happen if we don't speak up at this time. As mentioned, all these things are at a real tipping point now. And it's critically important that we do discuss and raise all these and shine a light on what our experience is in this sector so people can continue to be able to benefit from our direct employ service and also so we can increase our impact in areas that really need what we do, such as thin markets and regional and remote areas and very, very remote parts of Australia. So, it's never been more important and not afraid. We're not always going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I think as a founder, that's something that you've understand you've got to learn over time and you're putting yourself out there. But for us, it's, the cost of staying quiet is a lot more than speaking out. So, excited too.
Yeah. That's how you got me over the line. And I suppose that we're drawing to the end of the first episode now. Yeah. And I suppose if you could just summarize for me, what do you want this podcast to unlock for yourself? Yeah. I suppose for Carer Solutions and the disability sector and maybe even beyond that.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, I'm an innately curious person by nature. And I'm just so fascinated on a personal level and also professionally about other founders out there that are doing exactly what I did in industries that are not recognised, that don't have the opportunity to be able to speak about what they do, let alone be celebrated. And I think it's really important as a society that we, shine a light on those people. So that's, I guess, on a personal level for me. And also, I love to learn and grow and develop, and I'm interested to hear other people's stories that I can bring back to improve Carer Solutions, which then in turn will improve the state of the sector in which we operate and the care economy at large. So that's sort of my, big lofty ambition. I think for, the team, it's about recognising the incredible work that we do, the problem solving and the level of complexity and I think degree of difficulty that people don't understand that exists when you're trying to do something that, as we've said, there's no blueprint for, that there still isn't a blueprint for, that every day is a school day for us. I think that's really important. And also for the sector, it's really critical that we're having these conversations about sustainability, about thin markets, about how we increase our impact and about how we all survive as this, beast of a scheme continues to change and evolve moving forward. There's a lot of change fatigue. We've spoken about not just the families we work with, but also providers being at breaking point. We've seen a lot of them break literally in the last couple of years. And we've got a lot of people out there that need really quality and safe services. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that you touched on this is not just for the care sector, but beyond,
absolutely.
Waste management, all those other industries that are really critical to everyday life
Totally.
for us
Yeah.
that don't always get the recognition.
Absolutely
But,
not. Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting to explore.
Yes, definitely.
Well, look, we're coming to the end of our first episode for Built Different. But next up, we have the sector that no one talks about. A little bit of irony in that title. But do you want to give us a bit of a sneak peek about what to expect?
Yeah. So, in the sector that no one talks about, we'll go into a bit more detail, but the service no one talks about, which is us. But also, to talk about just the way disability is viewed at large in our space, or in society, I should say, mainstream society. It's not spoken about unless it's these days a really bad headline, or makes the news for some horrific reason. So we want to, look at it from the other side of the coin. And I think also just breaking down some of those cultural perceptions that sit around our space and the work we do, and why it's not viewed in the way that it should be, and celebrated and recognised for the contribution it makes to families' lives.
Well, a lot to unearth there.
Yes.
But
it's just the beginning.
It is. Well, thank you, Jane. Cool. I really enjoy, I've heard your story a few times now, but, each time it does resonate. And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thanks, David. Looking forward to the next one.
Cheers.
See you.
See ya.
Bye.